Next thing to think about is once you have it the shape you want it to be, if you want to add any details, any texture or patterns, anything to it at all. So that could be cutting the top edge and maybe making certain areas dip down like a little wave. You could even press tools in, simple as like the edge of a paintbrush or a pencil, and create like a little design just by pressing a tool in there and creating a little ripple. There are some of these, there's just a few of these little stamps. So this is a little metal stamp, and you could use that to create a design. If you're pressing anything down here into the bottom, you just have to make sure that you're really gentle with it, because you don't want to press it through or press it so hard that it sticks to the mat board. So if you're going to press it here, it's best to kind of be real gentle and not push with too much pressure, because it's very easy to push down through there. The bottom of mine is really wet right now, so I'm going to wait and do something in there later because it's almost too wet to do anything. I can even smooth it out without leaving a bunch of gunk, so I'm going to wait until it gets a little harder, a little bit more moisture evaporates from there. Your texture could be as simple as like taking the tip of a spoon and just creating a little, you can create a pattern with something as simple as just pressing the spoon into the surface of the clay. So it creates a little texture like that. We also have some texture plates. So here's one of the texture plates. You can see that it's actually pressed up here. If I flipped it this way, it would press down. So this is kind of a neat way of adding texture. You just have to be careful to keep your hands kind of in a spot that supports the whole pot so that you're not letting it flop open or fall apart when you do this. And your piece really has to be strong enough. If you've got a lot of weak, thin areas, I would not try this. If your pot is a little on the thicker side like mine, like about that pinky width thick like we talked about, then it will be strong enough to hold up to this. So I'm just going to find a nice soft spot on the outside here and show you what this could look like. And then I'm just going to find a spot on here I think is interesting, and I'm going to press this little area there so I can show you. So I'm just laying that spot where I want to pick up the texture, and I'm just going to just gently, I'm not putting a lot of pressure, just gently press and kind of roll it across. But you can see that texture is kind of left behind there. If I did this when it was a little bit softer, it would show up more. And if you wanted to continue all the way around, just kind of find your spot where you want to create that texture. Make sure it's nice and smooth. What you would not want to do is take water here first and have it wet at all, because that's going to make it really sticky and it could actually stick to the texture plate. So make sure that there's no wetness to the clay. And if you did use water at all before you do this, make sure it's really blended into the clay before it touches this. Let's just try this in one more area here. So kind of looking where it needs to go, laying it down on that spot, and just gently kind of pressing and rolling it across. I'm not pushing very hard. A pencil can do so many cool things, like the eraser end of a pencil. You can create some cool patterns with. I'll show you over here. So just pressing an eraser in, it gives you some nice little circles. The lead end of a pencil, if you use it on its side, it gives you kind of a neat little mark. You can create some patterns with that. Another simple tool to use for clay is marker caps. And I have some of these too I can put out. It gives you kind of some cool textures. So let's just try this out and I'll show you. You can use the whole thing and make a circle, just real gentle. Again, we don't want to push in too deep because we can easily push this in and actually create a hole in our piece. We wouldn't want to do that. You can press in just half of it, so it creates like a little semicircle. Create like little fish scales with that. And honestly, even the end of a fork. Let's try it. Yeah, cool. But whatever you're using to create texture, if you're doing any texture on your piece, make sure that you're not pressing deep. This should be really kind of surface. We're just kind of pressing it in just to the surface of that piece. So there's some tools like this over by the sink, some different shapes. There's some wooden tools that you can use. You never want to poke the texture into it because it gets too deep, so it's always better to use kind of the tools on the side, press in the edge of them. So depending on how you're holding this, you can create some different textures. If you press the whole thing in, you can do a little pencil texture. It gives different marker caps, can be cool. Interesting design, but you can see I'm not pushing it in, I'm kind of wiggling and pressing it around. Even the end of a marker. So we can use the prongs of a fork, and that gives you kind of a cool pattern. Some different shaped wooden tools over in the clay tool bins by the sink. It's like using the tip of that. That could give you a neat texture if you use that. Kind of repeat that. You could also use this edge, like that blade side, and create some lines. And it's better to stamp and press your lines instead of dragging a tool and trying to draw lines, because it will avoid creating rough spots that will be sharp after we fire it. Kind of a cool curved end here, so you can use it on that side. Gives it kind of a neat little pattern, or even on this side, it gives you a little bit of a different pattern, pretty similar. One of my favorite patterns that I've used before is actually this part of a binder clip. Let's see if we can get it to stamp. Come on, little binder clip. Just a little sticky, sticking too much. There we go. Now it's cooperating. So just a little gentle press and a wiggle, and you can create some kind of rose with that and do kind of a cool pattern with whatever you can find around the room. Just make sure you don't press too deep. Like that first one, I pushed a little deep. We want it to be really surface level, so it's just in the surface of the clay. I almost forgot to show you how to create a word. You can carve it in, but it never really turns out very nice when you try to draw into clay write words. It just gets all ragged and jagged and rough looking. So you can use pasta. I have these alphabet pastas that I bought, and you just have to find the letters that spell out your word. I'm going to do peace. This would be a very final finishing touch right before you call it done. So you lay out your letters so they're just setting on top of the clay. Uh-oh. Make sure they're going the right way. You gotta be patient with this one, and you've got to have just the right touch. So if you're not a careful human, this might not be for you. Did I crack my C? Tell me I didn't. Okay, here we go. Come here, little C. Get down there. There you go. And once you get your letters just how you want them. Oh, that guy needs to scoot in with his friends. Hold on. Hold on. You get over there. All right, so they're just setting on the surface. Now, we just gently tap to sink them in. Tap directly in. Make sure your finger is dry. Make sure the clay is not wet. We want it to be soft, but not wet or sticky at all, because this will not work. It'll become a big old mess. We just want to gently, gently tap, 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 tap. Letter, and if the little part doesn't want to go, you can just ever so carefully help it sink in a little bit more with a pencil or with a little clay tool. Get in there, buddy. Go on, get in there. And just let it be. You don't have to pull them out. Just let them be right there. And these will burn away. They'll just disappear, burn away, turn to ash in the kiln. So you can just leave them right in the surface of the clay. If they fall out, no big deal, as long as you can still see where they were. And that's all.